Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm John and this is Hannah.
Hi.
And all this month we're going to be looking at the various prompts for RPGaDay 2025. So let's get into it.
So it's day 17 and the cue is renew. What are we renewing, John?
Well, I was thinking I'd actually be a little bit indulgent since we're doing RPGaDay 2025, and I thought I'd talk about how this sort of thing has actually renewed my interest in recording some podcast episodes. And this sort of came into my mind when I was listening to the Old Man Grognard podcast recently, where Glenn Hallstrom, the guy who runs it, has wrapped up the podcast. And he was saying in his last episode, oh, do you know what? I think I've said all I need to say on this. I'm going to go on and do something else. So I sent him a message the other day saying, thanks for all the episodes. Entirely understand that. Been very entertained with your episodes and look forward to seeing what you're doing on YouTube. All the rest, sort of yada, 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 all the best. And it got me thinking that part of the reason I wanted to get involved, perhaps selfishly, in RPGaDay 2025 is not only because it's getting you to talk about sort of positive stuff in the roleplay hobby, which I thought was a nice thing. Mm-hmm. It's also because, as you're aware, I've, up until fairly recently, not really done much in terms of podcast recording episodes, not really done much in terms of YouTube episodes or anything like that. There's been a few blog posts on my Substack, mainly session write-ups from previous games or odd ideas I've got and sort of stuff like that. And I very much feel that was, in a similar way to what Glenn was saying on his podcast, was because I'd looked at some of the episodes I'd done the last time I'd had a sort of round of doing stuff regularly on the podcast, and I was like, that all seems a bit similar to stuff I've said before. And then you start worrying about that sort of stuff and you're like, oh, am I just repeating myself for no particularly good reason? And it's a short step from that to be like, oh well, I probably there's no point in me saying anything.
Yeah, and obviously I've not done many with you in the last couple of years because I've not been well.
Yeah,
it's been nice to get back to doing them, to just sitting and chatting about roleplay with my husband for a bit.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's actually one of the things, as well as the RPGaDay, and that's why I asked whether you'd be interested in recording them with me. Obviously Hannah said yes, thankfully, because for me, one of the things that I find most challenging about recording a podcast, and obviously when I say challenging, I mean you've got to take it in perspective. I'm just sat in front of a microphone with Hannah talking. It's not like we're climbing Mount Everest or doing anything ridiculous like that. It's not like a real hardship. But one of the sort of difficult bits for me is if I'm sat here on my own in this room talking into a microphone, then obviously, you're trying to address your stuff to the people who are listening and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's just you sat with a microphone talking to thin air, effectively, if you want to look at it like that. And I certainly find when I do that, I have my initial 5-10 points or whatever of things I want to say. I rattle through those fairly quickly, and then I'm like, okay, that took me 30 seconds. All right, I guess I'm done now, and that's it. Because there's no sort of conversation about it.
And this is something where we need to get back to doing responses to things people send in for us, because that was always fun, and again it brought more people into the conversation. So if you happen to be listening and you want to leave us a response,
there'll be a link to our SpeakPipe where you can leave a 90-second voicemail message in the description of this show. That was a lovely plug there. Look, very much appreciate that. And to be honest, that is something that as I've been listening to other people doing RPGaDay stuff, because my podcast listening had fallen off recently as well, but as I've started re-listening to various podcasts, I sent out about 5 different sort of voicemail messages to other people the other day, even if it's just to say I really enjoyed the episode. Here's a few things I was thinking based on what you'd said. I know for myself, as a sort of podcast creator, in inverted commas, it's really nice to get sort of feedback from people who are listening and have more of a conversation rather than just sort of shouting into the void, as the phrase goes. So I think in terms of the prompt renew, I say RPGaDay 2025, as well as renewing my interest in recording some podcast episodes, it's also, perhaps more importantly, got me to look at what stopped me actually recording them in the first place.
renewal's about not just having a brand new thing, but going back, looking at the old thing and improving it. You're allowed to change your ideas. You're allowed to talk about dinosaurs on the podcast again. Just because we've done episodes previously doesn't mean you haven't. You can't now.
No, I think you're absolutely right, love, and I'm well aware, certainly, and I suffer from this as much as anyone else, certainly in role-playing hobbies and everything else in life. The temptation is always to go for the new shiny, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So a new game comes out, you're like, great, I'm all in on that game, and you forget the other games. You're like, and I mean, Hannah's laughing because we're like looking over the vast shelves of books that I've collected over the years, but yeah, the temptation is to move on to the new shiny and not, rather than sort of doing or retooling what you're using already. And I was thinking about this recently on a slightly different matter when, because at the minute I'm running a couple of Warhammer Fantasy roleplay games, as you know, love, and they've sort of got like a limited lifespan to them. One by design. One of them is we're running the enemy within campaign, so when we get to the end of that campaign, that's the campaign done. The other one that I'm running with some of our friends from LARP, that has a sort of established like big bad guy, and when he's either defeated or not, that'll be the end of the campaign. So I've sort of half started thinking, oh, what shall I do for my next game after that? And I was like, I really like the idea, because technically these two Wolf campaigns are happening in the same campaign world, but they don't really intersect with each other by design, because that'll be horrendously complicated, because we're using two different versions of the rules, and anybody got time for like converting all that shit. So I was thinking, it'd be quite cool to do something in like an OSR sort of style hex crawl game, which is my like game of choice, but have like the two adventuring parties in the same campaign world. And while I was thinking about that, Johannes was saying to me, he was like, oh, well, why didn't you revisit the campaign from your Smoke and Snow campaign? Because I thought that was really interesting. And for anyone who's not sort of watched the episodes that are on my YouTube channel, the way we ran two campaigns there, sort of one after the other, and the way that ended up with was a big sort of vampire king trying to take over the world. The player characters tried to stop him, got absolutely mullered in the final encounter with like all but one of them turning into vampires under his control, and the last person sort of throwing themselves into like a bottomless abyss with the magic sword doohickey to stop the vampire king from getting it. And so he was saying, oh, well, why don't you revisit that? And I was thinking, oh yeah, well, I don't want to just do exactly the same thing again. And that got me thinking, oh, well, maybe I could set it like 100, 1,000 years in the future, and we could sort of look at how that campaign world's changed. And I think that reflects back to what you were saying, love, because quite often when I do a campaign, I'm like, right, I've got a great new idea. It's got bog all to do with anything I've done before. It's going to be the best campaign ever. Let's go. And I very much put previous campaigns I've run in my rear view. Now, part of that's because my memory's awful and I don't remember like a campaign I ran like 6 years ago or whatever. However, with this one, I was lucky enough that because I'd got all the videos and I'd still got most of my notes on it, I could quickly look through it and I was like, oh yeah, I did really enjoy when that happened. Oh yeah, I remember when Rob's character got killed by all those giant carnivorous beetles in that ruined abbey. Oh yeah, that was a thing that happened. And I sort of refreshed my memory just reading through these little capsule descriptions. And I think it reacquainted me and sort of like renewed my enthusiasm for it. So you get the title in there. Because it reminded me of what I enjoyed about it. But then sort of seeing where it was and what I enjoyed about it then, I'm also like, well, how can I reuse some of those elements, but also add in some new stuff to keep myself and the players interested, rather than just sort of binning it off and going, that's consigned to the bin of history, I'm now going to do something entirely new.
And I think we need to take a similar approach in renewing the podcast.
Yeah.
In that we've stuck to it quite well so far. We're on day 17. We'll probably manage to get through to day 31 without too much trouble.
Would certainly hope so, yeah.
A few short episodes at a time.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll get lots of viewer responses and we'll have lots of questions to answer.
Well, we can
for a podcast at some point soon. But otherwise, we'll add to it when we've got something to say. We don't need to record something every week.
No, I absolutely agree, love. And I think that, going back to what we were saying before, certainly I've enjoyed filming these episodes far more than I would if I was just sat here on my own talking. And obviously, like for the benefit of those who don't know, the way sort of me and Hannah record these is when one of us is talking, so that we're not over sort of speaking each other, or we sat right next to each other, we literally just put a hand on the knee of the other person, and they know that like when they get to a reasonable point, they can wrap up, the other person jumps in. And we've got a few little things like that just to make recording easier, and we sort of edit them as we go along when one of us inevitably like trips their tongue up over something. I mean, that doesn't even make sense, let's face it, the way I've just said that, but you know what I mean. just to like minimise how much editing I have to do afterwards and stuff like that. But the main point of it is having this conversation. And I certainly know, like when I've done sort of YouTube video rambles with like Johannes and Matthew, if there's like a few of us online, I can talk for like 4 hours about like various bits of role playing, and the thought of, oh, am I repeating myself? Am I saying stuff I've already said? Never even enters my head at all, because I'm just having a conversation with my friends and very much enjoying it. Whereas when I'm sat here on my own, constantly while I'm recording it, I'll be like, I'm sure I've done an episode on this before. I'm not sure people will be interested in this.
So what we're really saying is that the best way to renew something is to talk to other people about it, even if you've talked to them about it before.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, sweetie, because I think that if you get other people involved, you inevitably get different perspectives. And one of the benefits of that is, like, you might say something now, love, where it's like, oh, I've not thought of that at all. And that'll then make my opinion a little bit different, and we'll take the discussion off in an entirely different way. Whereas if I'm in sort of like an echo chamber and it's just me talking, all I'm going to get is my same old thoughts in the same way, just sort of regurgitated over and over. And I don't find that interesting, and I doubt anyone else would, to be honest. So yeah, so get your enthusiasm renewed, maybe recycle some old elements, but you know, try and think about them in a different way, and probably just don't put too much pressure on yourself, is I think the vibe of this episode. So that's it from me and Hannah for this RPGaDay 2025 episode.
Bye!
Hopefully you'll join us in the next one, and until we see you again, take care, stay safe, and whenever you're playing, have fun.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.